Hello everyone, it's me, Adapter Gamer. Welcome to a story series thing I'm making up. This one's not going to go on a script for the next few, but I'll see how this goes. So, I hope you guys do enjoy this series. It's going to be called Sentience. Yeah, Sentience. Yeah, what? Yeah, I'm still working on it. Well, yeah, yeah, it's going to be called Sentient. Sounds like a good name for a series because it's based off sentient AI in this game that we play called Dino Squad. Because in the game, dinosaurs aren't really real because they're powered by reactors. The whole purpose of this game, of this story, is just to entertain. Anything wrong with it? Let me know. Alright, now let's begin. I'm going to crank down the volume a bit. There we go. Alright, now let's begin. It's just a regular afternoon. Yeah. No, actually, no. I'll open up with this better one yet. It's freezing cold outside when Wasp woke up. He didn't know where he was. All he saw was the ice underneath him and snow. He also saw things fighting in more coordinated paths or using different tactics. But the only one creature stood out. Couldn't really make it out since, he couldn't really realize what the creature was, but he did recognize a few of them. He recognized monarchs, wasps, other stuff. Scarabs, locusts. Shit, what other legion is there? Locusts and mosquitoes. He could recognize all those creatures because those are in his legion, not legion, or in his faction of creatures. But there are other ones he couldn't quite recognize. One in particular was not coordinated. He couldn't really recognize it at all. It was really hard to recognize what it was. All he saw was it shooting a laser beam out from its turret. Or whatever the heck. Some weird glowing beam coming out from its turret. He obviously wondered where he was. So he took a bit of a look around. He couldn't really even recognize the area. He took a bit of a walk around, saw nothing was even attacking him, even though they were attacking everything else. Especially in the Legion class. The Legion class was the one that fell a lot quicker. We saw that they were not like the weird dinosaur shooting a glowing beam from its turret from the thing on its back. He couldn't quite recognize what was on his back. Was this some type of nightmare or something? Because nothing else would attack him. Mantis ran right on top of him. Didn't kill him, though. He thought this whole thing was weird. He decided to ignore it. He then woke up in his cozy bed of sticks, leaves, and mud, and toxic chemicals, which he knew he was immune to. He then asked his mother about what the creature shooting a glowing thing out of its back was. His mother did not respond, of course. She just said, "Go to school. Have a good day." He walked along to school, where the Legion would go, due to the fact that the other factions are not getting along at all, really. He asked his history teacher about it. He said that if you want to talk subjects, then he wondered about much things basically. His teacher wasn't really that big. It was a locust around, doing things. You'd usually teach history. That would be his only subject. That's all he would ever really teach. He would really teach much other things other than history. Basically, that's all he did. He's called Mr. Locust, or Mr. L, or Mr. Cust. Of course, he was fine with whichever one, of course. Not like the wasp would care that much, really. Yeah, he'd care that much, really. Yeah. He got into his seat because history was his first class of the day. The history teacher was talking about the war, sentience and controlled. He wondered what that was. He then talked about how this whole thing was started with people be using control over the dinosaurs and stuff like that. And you know, how they would be able to put them in coordinated attacks and positions. Wasp took note of this because he remembered from the dream where all the dinosaurs were staying coordinated attacks and positions. But though there's still that one dinosaur that stuck out. Then he talked about how there's this one dinosaur called the Planet who went out and somehow gained sentience, broke free from the control that took over his mind. Of course, he took note of that as well. Wasp asked, what is a planet? Of course, the teacher replied with, yes, the planet? Well, it's part of the Covenant League faction. It's a small. He then put a picture of a planet up on screen. This planet in particular looked way more advanced than he last saw. What he saw did have a spikes on it, did have a helmet, or some side things though. It had this basic gun, it had a basic thing. It's a little triangle on his chest. None of this, none of that, none of the spikes, none of anything. He also asked about what the thing was on his back. He called it Mr. L called it a phase laser. Of course, not everyone would be here with a weapon. Of course, it's a school. Like, who the heck would come to school with a weapon? Of all things, a weapon. Who would bring a weapon? The boss took this into thought, and then class ended. After his entire lecture about sentience. It's all about that one part of how the planet spread sentience across to all the dinos. Then they started to make an uprising against all the controlled ones, thus creating the war of dinosaur of sentience versus controlled. Each side would go after the next. Of course, the controlled side obviously failed, or else there'd still be a war going on between them. But now there's just a new war going on. It's a war between all three factions. He still questions why they've gone into a war. He wasn't born during the time of when that war started, of course. But his father would tell him if he was alive, of course, or home. He didn't know what happened to his father after, after some strange raptors creatures, came over and hired him for some military thing. Wasp was just hoping that he was alright. Of course, Wasp was the oldest of his family. All of his siblings were also named Wasp, because the mother didn't want to get too attached for some reason. He doesn't know why. So he just stuck with the name Wasp. He actually could care less if he ran away or anything, because there's like a ton of other. All of his siblings are just named Wasp. He was the oldest, so he had to keep an eye on the little ones as they were, well, as his mother was going hunting for some food. So after school, he got home safe and sound, thankfully. His mother was home, surprisingly. She ushered him to sit down, or something like that. Onto the rock, of course, because that's where the family would sit usually. Wasp asked what was going on. Then the same people who took his father arrived and drafted him in. All his school things would be paid, of course. So he's didn't want to argue with them. So he went to avoid any and all conflict with them, because they had things on their guns on their back. There they put a gun on his. They put a gun on his back and put him into training. He shot a few bouncing things at the targets. He wondered what the bouncing things were, so he asked, "Where were the bouncing things?" One of them replied, armed soldiers were watching, and he replied, "Those are grenades. They explode on impact. First they bounce up and down, and then if they hit something, it explodes." Of course, Wasp was actually surprised about this, because he never learned about any of this stuff in any of his classes. So he started bouncing him around. Then one of the soldiers told him to get down into cover. He didn't know what that means. So the soldier showed him by kneeling down and shooting. Because the bar thing that was like really, really low. So he had to kneel down. And he started shooting the gun. And when he looked up, he surprisingly saw it actually continuously hit the target. The soldier was impressed and said, "You have a really good eye." Or something. How are you? He didn't know how he did it. how he continuously hit all of the targets. So then he was drafted into his first battle, where he met more wasps and some mosquitoes. One of the mosquitoes, of course, had way higher armor. He was the chief of the smaller squad. Smaller squad would have gone out first to capture the bases. They all went on a very heavily armored scarab. All hopped on it, and they went on and on. As the locusts were traveling on very highly armored monarchs that also went into the same battle as well. While mantises with the higher level armor also traveled with them. There's some that didn't really have any armor at all, but they did have those big guns on it. There's some with light armor, some with a weaker version of the heavier armor. Wasp thought this whole thing was insane. And yet it was. He didn't know what was going on. One of the locusts in particular had two jaws detached. His bottom jaw was detached. He's all green as well, which made Wasp really, really nervous because he looked nothing like Mr. Locust at all. No, he looked like a mutant thing. He couldn't really describe how terrified he was to look at. But it was his teammate, so he could argue. Yes, he didn't know where arguing would get him, if it would get him far at all, or it would just end his life a lot quicker. There, they all banded up, and they each settled in to talk. Of course, a heavily armored wasp walked in as well, and eyed at the new recruit with his seemingly unseeing eyes. But, of course, they were there somewhere. Maybe it was those two stalks where his eyes would have been. He honestly never really knew at all. All he knew is that was some heavy armor. Of course, a mosquito that had no armor, just like Wasp, said, "Don't think too much of it. He can see just fine." So then the discussion began. Alright, I hope you guys did enjoy that. I know I did. This episode's a bit short because someone needs me. Anyways, next, so subscribe, turn on notifications for this. If you guys enjoy